Welcome back to Reinvention Real Talk. I am your host, Karen Larea, and today we are unpacking one of the most misunderstood yet transformative experiences in both leadership and personal life, reinvention through transition. Whether you're stepping into a new career, a new identity, or a new stage of life, transitions define not just what we do, but who we become. Today's guest is a one of a kind expert, someone who has spent decades helping leaders around the world navigate critical transitions with purpose, clarity, and impact. He is the author of international best-selling book Mastering Executive Transitions, the definitive guide, and has been ranked the world's #1 executive coach by CEO Today. Welcome to Reinvention Real Talk, Navid Nazemian. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for the warm welcome. And I am super stoked to have this conversation with you and your audience today.
Thank you so much. And before we get into it, I just want to let our listeners know I thought you were in Los Angeles. You're joining us in Dubai. So welcome. We are so happy that you made this time to be with us.
Absolutely delighted to be here.
Let's start with first question I want to know. Navid, you talk about transitions not as mere jobs or roles, but as identity shifts. Can you help our listeners understand why the transitions phase, that limited period between who we were and who we are becoming, is so crucial to them?
Sure. So firstly, I think it's really understandable. It's human nature that we keep, especially in the world of work, that we continue repeating things that have made us successful before. So I want to use a very simple example. So if I was a very successful sales individual, and eventually the company considers me to become a first line leader of other sales individuals, my first hunch would be to continue to outperform in sales. Whereas my real role now is a very different one, which is I now need to spend 40 to 60% of my time mentoring and coaching the people that report into me, compared to 100% of my time that was focused on sales previously. And that simple example at the first leadership level really gives us an idea around how much more complicated it is if enterprise leaders step up into the first C-suite executive role. So if you are the first CEO, if you are the first CTO, CHRO, you really have to look at the new position in an entirely new way. And often with that, what is involved is to kind of shed some of the identity that you have so successfully built, which ironically was the very same reason for why you have been promoted. And you need to start to look at a new mix of skills and activities that you would like to own going into the new position.
And now let me ask you this, because this is a little bit curious. What happens when we try to skip the transition and jump straight to success?
Yeah, well, I mean, the statistics are really staggering. I mean, I took 5 years to research for my wonderful book. And the first time I bumped into this number, I couldn't quite believe it. And by the way, my book launched in the year 22 in January. So this is way before ChatGPT and any of the large language models were introduced to the market. And what I remember is when I read that 4 out of 10 executives fail when they go through a career transition, I just couldn't believe it. I assumed either it's 4%, so this is just a typo, or if anything, it may be 14%. So 1 out of 7. But the reality is it's 4 out of 10. And so I then started to double click on the 40% failure rate because I was intrigued by, I worked in HR most of my life. I spent 20 years working in the wonderful world of human resources for some of the world's most admired companies. But if I wanted to take an honest assessment and a stock of what I have experienced, the 40% number is very much true. And the 5 resources that I cite for this particular statistic, one of the most validated ones is from Heidrick & Struggles, one of the largest search firms in the world. And they had placed over a 10-year time period 20,000 executives into thousands of organizations. And when they went back and checked back on all those 20,000 appointments, they saw that at the 18 months mark, 4 out of 10 didn't make it. And so that is one of the most validated studies that exists today as to why the 40% is not just a fantasy number or a made up figure, but it's actually based on hardcore facts. And it's really true. So 4 out of 10 don't make it, which kind of begs the big question, why is that? How can that actually be?
Why do all the 40% of the leaders during their first, anywhere from 12 to 18 months in a new role, why do they struggle?
Yes.
In your opinion, in your experience?
Sure. So without, boring you or your audience with the top 10 reasons for executive transition failure, which is a full chapter in my book,
Yes.
when I'm invited to podcasts and sometimes I do keynote speeches, I group them into 3 group reasons.
Okay.
The first one is people. The second one is culture. And the third one is politics. And as I said it in a different podcast to another host, it's the technical skills or the functional skills that gets you hired.
Okay.
And it's the soft skills or the lack of them that gets you fired.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So in the top 10 reasons, the functional technical ranks as the 9 out of the 10, if you look at the percentages. So it's roughly 11% of the time that executives don't make it because they just don't have. Think of a chief technology officer who has a long established career, but the world of technology is moving so fast that they are really not able to deliver what the role needs now and in the next 5 years compared to the last 35 years.
Yeah.
So that is still a percentage, but it's such a small percentage. And the bigger percentages all center around people, culture, politics, which ultimately means things like, I use the example of Walt Disney,
Okay.
which is one of the more prominent cases.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, both of these gentlemen happen to be named Bob, and both of them are white male, 50-plus-year-old executives. So Bob Iger, who used to be the iconic group CEO of Walt Disney, one of the most admired companies on the planet,
Yeah.
on the back end of a long tenure and a successful track record as a group CEO, decided that it's time to pass the baton on to someone worthy of his succession and step up to become the chair of the board. And so he promoted this gentleman called Bob Chapek into this position. And barely 10 months in, Bob Chapek had to be fired and Disney had to pay him an exit package of $23.4 million. And so if you take a step back and look at how this appointment actually came to take place, everything was done almost by the books, meaning Bob Chapek was not an outsider to Disney. He had been what many people consider to be a homegrown talent. He joined Walt Disney actually with, I think, 4 or 6 years of first experience. And then he grew his career over more than 2 decades in the same organization. And every 2 to 3 to 5 years, he was given an increased role scope and responsibility. And his most recent position before he was given the top job was to run the Walt Disney theme parks, which is the largest revenue and the largest profit driver for the entire group. And so if you think of it, he did a great job in all the other positions, including the number 2 job. But his failure ultimately was that he underestimated the amount of politics. And as I'm sure you have heard this in the news, there was a very famous senator in that particular state that had a bit of a political fallout with Walt Disney for a certain topic. And so it really started to spiral down from there, so that he eventually had to be fired by the same Bob that had appointed him. And because it was such a desperate and crucial situation for Walt Disney, Bob Iger stepped down again from the chair of the board, became the group CEO for a number of years before he then appointed someone else to kind of, take over the top job. So that's just one of the many examples in my book. I speak about 6 prominent examples from companies like Hewlett Packard, SAP, Boeing, and Uber, all of which are champions in their own rights, but
Yeah.
every single one of those companies had an unsuccessful CEO transition at the very top of the house.
Wow. Your book has some great information. It is a great read. Even if someone is not just thinking of business, but it also leads to even life lessons that you can take from there. So we're going to put that in the show notes. We're going to link that so people can definitely get their hands on this book. Now, Navid, I want to talk to you about career change. So from like a career change to reinvention, because that's what this whole podcast is about reinventing your life. But reinvention is often talked about in personal terms, such as leaving a job, starting a new life, or healing emotionally. But your work frames professional transitions as deeply as human experiences. So going off of that, how do you define reinvention in the context of leadership transitions?
Sure. I mean, I don't have a book perfect definition to give to you, but I'm happy to have a go at it. So,
Yeah.
firstly, I would like to reiterate what I said a little earlier today, which is, as soon as you move into a new level of leadership and a new
Mhm.
level of responsibility, you really have to take a step back
Mhm.
and think about, okay, how, when we reflect this ideally with your transition coach,
Mhm.
how do I need to reflect about all the things and attributes and characteristics and skills and activities that made me successful, that
Mhm.
got me to be promoted into this role?
Yeah.
Which one of those do I need to keep and maintain and
Mhm.
nourish further? And which one of those will not serve me well in this new position?
Yeah.
Because there is quite something different at this level that is required of anyone, including myself, stepping
Mhm.
up, that may be very different than what I used to do or what I used to know to be true.
Mhm.
And I would like to cite one of my mentors. His name is Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. He himself is an iconic coach and a legend. He
Mhm.
has been in the field of coaching for 48 years, and
Mm.
he often jokes about it and says, when I became a coach, nobody knew what a coach does, so I just made it up.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, so he has written 42 books,
Mhm.
and one of those books has outsold the other 41. And
Oh,
that
wow.
book is titled, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And for me,
Oh.
that is the epitome of the definition of what it really means to reinvent yourself.
Mhm.
Because again, every time you step up in a new, significant new level of leadership and responsibility, you
Yeah.
just cannot continue taking
Mhm.
out the old playbook and just going through that in the same way as you made your successful moves previously.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, what do you think the link between professional reinvention and personal identity reinvention, especially for those in the second half of their life who are redefining themselves?
Sure. I mean, one of the tools that I talk about in my book is the double diamond framework of executive transitions. That
Okay.
is my idea about, okay, if anyone wanted to be more structured and more guided by what actually works,
Mm-hmm.
this is the guide that you could use. It consists of 7 phases,
Okay.
and it takes roughly 12 to 18 months to move through those phases.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other parts of this, and why I came up with the idea of double diamond,
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea how to name this framework,
Mm-hmm.
was to look at the 4 or 5 C's of what makes great diamonds, generally
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah.
And so, whether it's carat weight, color, clarity, cut, and certification,
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes a diamond great. If you wanted to invest a bit of money into that. But
Yeah.
if I wanted to take my own little example and use my own 5 C's for what makes great transitions,
Mm-hmm.
um, over and above the 7 phases and everything else that's included in the framework, I introduced the 5 C's of executive transition success.
Yeah.
The first one is context,
Okay.
arguably the most important C of all,
Mm-hmm.
because it looks at the circumstances of the organization, at the competition landscape, government, and society. If you
Mm-hmm.
think of it, this is one of the reasons why Bob Chapek was unsuccessful, because all he did was to look at the internal numbers, look at the business revenue, look at the profitability,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It just so happens that when you step up to the big job, the
Yeah.
number one role in the company, you also have to manage and nourish relationships with external stakeholders. And these may be the Senate of the state where your company is headquartered in. This may be the President of the United States. And so it suddenly is not just your inner game that you used to run so well, because that's what got you the big promotion. You suddenly have to divert your focus from internal to external. So that's the first C. The second C looks at culture. And this is important because every organization has a different set of values. You can sometimes call them guided principles. You can call them beliefs. No matter what words you use, the values of a company will be different to the one that even is in the same industry and sector competing with it. And also the definition of what a great leadership is different. I think if you wanted to succeed in a company like X, which is owned by Elon Musk, I think you need to demonstrate very different leadership skills than if you want to succeed in Microsoft, right? And so those are two successful technology companies in their own rights. But what it takes to succeed from a leadership definition and perspective is fundamentally different. So that's the second C. The third one looks at commitment. So by that, I mean, what is the organization committed to achieve for its customers, clients, and society at large? And again, different companies have different ideas about that. The fourth one is circles. This is one of the great examples I use in my book without naming the company. This is someone who ignored the informal decision makers in the same organization. So all this gentleman did was to look at the circles of influence and power. So he had all the org charts laid out in front of him, and he mapped his key stakeholders as per the seniority level, which is a good starting point. But the reality is, Karen, that I'm sure you agree that there are always very influential key opinion makers in any organization, even in political parties, that may not necessarily hold the most senior position as per the job title. But those voices will be looked at when it comes to making a vote. I don't know if you know that, but I can share that with you. In Germany, this is the country I grew up in. When the political parties in the parliament are voting, right, every political party has got a lead on that voting poll, meaning if and I couldn't possibly read all the papers that are available to me as a pre-read to make my vote count. All I need to do is to look at Karen. If Karen is the whip of my party, I only need to see how is Karen voting. Is she voting for or against this paper? And I will vote exactly the same, because I know that if Karen is deemed to be the expert on the topic, I will not be doing a disservice to my party by voting exactly as she does. So that's the fourth C. And then the last one is confidence, right? What are the levels of employee engagement in this particular organization? What is the leadership DNA of this firm? And again, they may be very different than what I used to be used to, or what you used to know in my previous company. So just by using this very tiny example of the 5 C's, what we are doing as transition coaches is to help the leaders to do two things. One is to reduce the so-called derailment risk by 50% or more, meaning the leader is less likely to walk on those landmines that are lying everywhere, and they're just waiting for someone to walk onto them until they blow up. And the second thing we do is, because this is a more structured, more intentful way of transitioning yourself into a new position, you are also likely to transition more quickly, more effectively. So we reduce the so-called time to productivity by 50% or more. And just by using this one tiny tool, the leader is going to gain a benefit on two different fronts.
So it's almost like this phase journey is what you're talking about. It helps someone land almost like a better version of themselves in those positions. Yeah.
Absolutely. But also more importantly, it's not the higher you go up, it's really less about yourself only. And it's more about the way you show up. It's the way you organize and motivate the troops. It's the way you become a role model. One of the other examples I cite in my book is a very famous group CEO of a telecommunication company. And in a town hall, setting, he makes just a side comment. around someone asks him a question like, is it really a good thing that we still have this good old-fashioned telephone booth all over the country? This is an American CEO. And he's like, yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe someone needs to look into it. So I don't have an answer to that. 2.5 months later, in the C-suite, in the boardroom, someone walks up to him with a paper that is 614 pages and says, sir, we have just finished doing the analysis on phone booth and whether it's worth our while or not. What he didn't realize is that a flipping comment, a bypassing comment that wasn't meant to be like, guys, I want someone to be dedicated to this project. There were hundreds, I think at times, there were 120 employees dedicated just on this project.
Wow.
He didn't even know he had given the mandate to anyone to start to create a project. But this is what you say at the very top, whether you like it or not, will be taken for granted a lot more quickly, with a lot more care and energy than you would actually hope for. And so this is why you have to be super careful about the things you say and how you show up, coming back to your point, identity and all that, so that everyone knows what is the task at hand, how am I going to fit into this, and what is the big picture that we are trying to establish here.
And now, going on that example, but let's use a different example. Could you share an example of maybe a leader who succeeded not because they were technically brilliant, but because they mastered the human side instead?
Absolutely. Yes. So this is actually a client of mine, and I won't mention his name, but he was appointed group CEO of a large organization. And this company was truly global. So they had regional sites, they had a global products and divisions, and many more key suppliers and clients and so on.
Okay.
So when he was appointed, early on, he appointed me to work with him. And as it's very common, and it still is very common, when a group CEO gets appointed, they go on what I call a listening tour. So because they're the newbie in the house, they're the new kid on the block, they go and visit all the main sites. They go and have town hall meetings with thousands and thousands of employees at the same time. And he did something that many others didn't, which is not falling into the trap of early on making big, grand statements and taking a position on many things. And I have seen that going wrong with many other similar leaders, in that, it's like the second week into the organization and they already think they know everything about this company. They believe that they have earned the right to bring about major changes to the organization. Although the reality is, and if they were to be objective enough with themselves, they're nowhere near there. So what he did on his grand tour, and he used a Menti as a tool, Mentimeter, he said, okay, and he gave like his 5-minute introduction. He used a family photo of himself with his lovely wife and the 3 kids. And so he really made it a personal introduction, not like, oh, and I, graduated at Harvard, and I did this MBA at Stanford, and I'm the best, person. Anyway, so he really made it a personal introduction, very personable, very private.
Okay.
And then he said, look, our company is doing okay, but I'm sure you all agree with me that okay is not a state that we would like to be happy with.
Yeah.
And so the question then becomes, what is it that we can do more of, less of, or stop doing? So this was his mantra. So he then started the poll, and everyone could scan the barcode and give their input as to what is the one thing we must continue going forward as an organization, because it really has made us successful, and we ought to keep doing that going forward.
Okay.
One simple question, and he got a gazillion ideas. Second question is, what is the one thing we are not doing yet? Something that a competitor or a different company in a different industry is doing that we ought to look into, because it would really also be an interesting case for us to explore.
Okay.
Simple question, start doing. Got a gazillion ideas. Third question, what is the one thing that may have served us well in the past, but looking 5 to 10 years out, with everything that's happening right now in our world and our industry, we must stop doing? Simple question, a gazillion ideas. He
Yes.
did the same thing at all major sites. He then repeated the same thing online with every employee of that organization. It was a large company with over 100,000 employees.
Oh, wow.
And 6 weeks into this exercise, he came
Uh-huh.
back and said, all right, this is what I have heard you say.
Mm-hmm.
And he had grouped all these things into like, 2 or 3 things in each of those 3 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
These are the 3 things we will maintain because they will serve us well in the future and they have served us well in the past. And
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely abide by that. These are the 2 or 3 things we must start to look into because for whatever reason we haven't been doing them yet. But
Mm-hmm.
they will be critical to our success going forward. And
Yeah.
these are the 2 or 3 things we will stop doing because they certainly will not serve us well in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's sort of a listening tour.
Yeah.
Yes, my grandpa used to say, son, there's a reason that dear God has given you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Make sure you
Yeah.
use them wisely and proportionately. It's a
Yes.
listening tour. It's not like coming on a big stage and all spotlights are on you and you make the
Yeah.
grand gestures and you think you know everything and you bring about all the big changes without actually knowing would this serve this company well. But
Yeah.
that's my idea of a listening tour and a great example to use how someone can rally the troops behind an idea that is essentially not theirs, but
Yes.
it's an idea that was co-created at the grassroots level all
Mm-hmm.
the way up and
Yeah.
just played back to the organization. So the
Yeah.
level of buy-in into that sort of a transformation program will be
Yeah.
already super high compared to, oh, my Stanford playbook says we have to bring in McKinsey and kill this division
Yes.
and move into this product segment and do this and that.
So it's more like and I do tell this to my kids all the time. Don't be a boss, be a leader.
Mhm.
And he was a leader.
He did not have all the answers. He
Yes.
couldn't possibly. He was an external hire. How could he
Yes.
possibly know all the answers to the next 5 to 10 years of the company? Although
Exactly.
technically that was his job.
Yes, a boss is the one who knows everything, but the leader is the one who's gonna go rally the troops and make sure, everyone is making his final decision, but everyone has that input. I think that's wonderful. That's a great example. Now, I want to go into mindset shifts because I think it's really important. And in your book and your teachings, from what I've read, there's a consistent thread that we transition not just externally, but internally. Now, what are the common mindset patterns that block people during a reinvention?
Sure, sure. So this one is the only example I will share with you today and your listeners that is not grounded in a particular methodology, or it's not something that I have spent 5 years researching and
Okay.
citing as I have done with my book 156 times. So this is my humble definition of what makes an
Yeah.
outstanding leader. I call them qualities. Okay.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
you said mindset shift. I call them the 6 essential qualities of extraordinary leaders.
Okay.
And so here it goes. The first two are
Hmm.
named, the qualities are named confidence
Hmm.
and self awareness, right?
Yeah.
I will not mention any famous politicians, but I think one that comes particularly to mind is one that has a ton of self confidence, but
Hmm.
unfortunately is lacking the look in the mirror and
Hmm.
seeing how some of those messages are actually landing with the uh, audience.
Yeah.
So a leader that pays attention and gets both sides of this equation right
Hmm.
does 2 things. It's all about his or her self leadership.
Okay.
And the idea behind having the confidence and the self awareness at the same time helps them to do what I call expand their identity. So
Okay.
that's the first two.
Okay.
The next two are being connected and
Hmm.
inspiring. So this is quality number three, number four.
Okay.
Connected meaning, think of the Wi Fi symbol,
Hmm.
that although you are in the ivory tower and technically far away from the realities on the ground, you
Yeah.
have no issues whatsoever when you are on your regional tour, when you are in your all hands sessions, when you are speaking to someone on the factory floor, that you know what is happening out there. You are absolutely connected to your people, to your products, to your manufacturing, whatever the business model is. You really understand your key clients, what they want from you, which products are strong, which ones are not, and so on. So that's the idea behind being connected. And the fourth one is inspiring, meaning I could be the most connected person in the world. I could be the most confident person in the world. I could be super self-aware. But if I am not able to inspire large number of people, and as a minimum, the people that report into me, I will have a very hard time to really move the needle on anything because I'm that isolated person that is well connected but keeps everything to himself.
Yeah.
I am the one that walks into the office, says hi, but never asks for anything that may inspire me as a leader, any ideas. And so these two pay a dividend on team leadership. And the idea behind these two is to enhance the impact of the leader. And that brings me to the last two on the qualities. The fifth one is called courage. And number 6 is titled clarity.
Okay.
So courage meaning, look, I've worked in 7 different industries in the 26 years I used to be active in the corporate world before I stepped down and do what I love doing full-time as a coach. Courage is really meaning that you sometimes have ideas that you're not even sure if they're going to work out. But you do have the courage because you have enough data points to know that this is your big bet. It may or may not work, but you do have the courage to explain to the rest of the organization why you want to take that risk. I mean, think about landing a man on the moon, right? It was something that was never done before.
Yeah.
And if you continue to say, well, I'm not sure it's safe, I'm not sure it's doable, I'm not sure it's feasible, it probably will never happen. But someone somewhere took that hard, courageous call to say, you know what? We will put a man on the moon and we will do it within this time frame.
Yes.
And clarity meaning, again, I have many such examples in my book where the leader is super courageous, but not necessarily, having the clarity as to what they are putting their bets on, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it becomes a bit of a lottery, like, oh, I'm going to throw money at all these various ideas and I hope one of them is going to work out.
Yeah.
That's not what clarity is. Clarity is to know your 2 or 3 big bets, no more than that. And so these two pay a dividend on business leadership. And if you get those two right, they enhance or elevate the results of the business. So if you expand your identity through confidence and self-awareness, if you enhance your impact by being connected and inspiring, and if you demonstrate business leadership by being courageous and having the clarity, you will elevate the business results and everyone will be looking up to you and going to great length to make things happen that you want them to.
And a success for all and for the company. Now let's talk about how in that instance, now how should someone interpret failure during a reinvention? Should it be a setback? Should it be a signpost for growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is where the growth mindset idea comes in, right? I mean, I sometimes have coaches and I train other coaches in my methodology. So the transition coaching is also a training program for coaches. If someone is interested, they're welcome to hit me up. And sometimes I hear in the general introduction round, when I speak about failures, and I've had my fair share of those, someone turns around and says, well, I haven't had a single client case being a failure. And my typical response to someone like that is, well, then I am assuming you haven't had enough cases coming your way, right? I mean, it's very obvious to me. Now, of course, I teach the methodology. I've done 350 of those assignments by now. And so I know a thing or two about how to get this right. But that does not mean that every single client that I sign up to work with is 100% success. I mean, that's just statistically impossible. And that also means for the leader that, if you have 2 or 3 big bets, one of them may not work out. That's absolutely fine. As long as 1 or 2 do work out.
Yes.
And that's what you want to instill in the organization, which is, I mean, if nobody took any risk, right? And it's depending on the industry, I assume, right? So if you work in the nuclear sector, you are likely to be a lot less risk aware than if you are in the fast-moving consumer goods business, where 60% of your product inventions will disappear from the shelf 6 months after they have been introduced to the market. That's just the business model that you're inheriting. But if you work in a very conservative industry where everything is about safety, and you work for NASA or some company like that, well, you're probably not keen to make too many mistakes. But context specific, I think it is still important to enable learning at all levels, and that just means that if you try enough times, eventually some of those trials will not go as per the plan. That's the business model that pharmaceutical companies have inherited, right? I mean, they have so many clinical trials, and sometimes up to 5 years into that clinical trial, they still don't know if the compound is going to become an actual product, and they have pumped $1 billion into that compound, not knowing if it's going to make it. But if you have your bets right, if you pump enough money in enough compounds with different efficacy in different trials, eventually you're going to come with your blockbuster drug that's going to pay for more than all the other failed attempts you've had previously.
That's important. And I love how you said maybe not everything is going to be a success, but you have your path there. And sure enough, you said one or two things, and that means success, which is great. And so I think a lot does have to do with, in my opinion, is you have to have emotional intelligence as well to be a leader. And I want to see like what would be like, not just for the leaders that we talk about and that you have in your books, which is fantastic, but not anyone just listening to this podcast, to build emotional intelligence that allows them to lead meaningful. How do they build emotional intelligence? Could you give us some steps that they can get there to?
Yeah, so firstly, I do not consider myself to be a deep expert on EQ. I think there are many famous authors who have written books on the topic and so on. So I don't want to claim that I am the guru on the topic. If there's anything I claim to be a bit of a guru on, it's my own topic. But really, I mean, emotional intelligence for me encompasses many things. I mean, just think of some of the things I said about the qualities of an outstanding leader. Self-awareness is emotional intelligence, meaning you're not just, like a loudspeaker does, just shouts out commands, like they do in the military sometimes, and expect everyone to say, yes, sir, and just run, right, or kill. But you have a degree of awareness around, okay, I may have overreacted in this particular meeting after I heard the bad news. Or I asked my CFO to do this analysis with me, and it's the second time I've asked him to deliver it to me, and for whatever reason he hasn't delivered it. So rather than bursting out in front of the ExCo members and having a go at the poor individual, and the analysis may well be still in the making, he or she just hasn't responded to me that I will eventually get it, maybe next week. I will be curious around that and have a conversation with him in a one-on-one setting and say, hey, Karen, you remember I asked you twice now what happened to the analysis with the phone boxes and the booth. By when do you think you were able to turn that around, right? And if Karen then says, oh, I got 2 of my best team members on it, you will have it next week on your desk. That's all I need to know. So emotional intelligence for me means also to, not take things for granted immediately, but to demonstrate a bit of an agility around if things are not going according to plan. Demonstrate your curiosity around trying to understand the root causes of what is not working well. Or if you think you have done a great inspirational speech and there is a Mentimeter for people to give you a score on a scale from 1 to 10, how brilliant they found this, and you get a lot of 6s and 5s and some 3s and 2s, not to be offended by that, but to start to look into that and speak to people you trust as to, Karen, and this is the feed-forward methodology that Marshall Goldsmith brilliantly applies. If there was one thing I could do to be more impactful as a presenter, what would it be and why? And just let you to come at it without any judgment, without any offense, without anything like that. So for me, those are some of the examples I can share with you around how I have come to appreciate what you refer to as emotional intelligence in leaders, more in the behavior and more in the way they process things rather than what great gestures they make and what amazing things they say that
Yeah.
may be, sounding very nice, but
Uh-huh.
actually not working in real life.
Well, I think that's a great example that you gave. So give yourself a little more credit on the EQ you definitely know about. And Navid, as we wrap up, I want to know, where can our listeners connect with you? Let's let them know.
Sure. So I'm boring and simple, meaning I do not have the bandwidth to dance on all the various social media platforms. LinkedIn is my main platform. I have more than 30,000 followers, and this is the only platform that I use to connect with my audience. I do not use a chatbot or a VA. I
Hmm.
respond to every single query I get myself. And I just love the idea of LinkedIn because it really is a great professional network. So that's the best place to hit me up. And then, if the audience is interested, I also have a weekly thought leadership newsletter where
Mm,
I talk about these topics and various other topics on a weekly basis.
okay.
It has more than 8,000 subscribers, currently still free of charge. So if
Okay.
anyone wanted to become a better leader, a better manager, or a better employee, this
Hmm.
is probably a good starting point. So these are the two links I can share with you if you wanted to include them in the show notes. And as I
Yes.
said, I'm usually courteous and kind, and I respond to every single query myself. So I would
Yeah.
invite anyone that wanted to reach out and connect to do that.
Perfect. And we will put those in the show notes for all of you that are listening that want to get in contact with Navid and find out more about his amazing work. And now I have my signature question I ask every single one of my guests. It is the last question I'm going to ask of you. Navid, in one word, what does reinvention mean for you?
Curiosity.
Curiosity. I love that. And why would it be curiosity?
Yeah, because look, I mean, I may not have all the answers as to what would my reinvented self look like, but
Hmm.
if I apply a curious mind as to what it may look like, if I
Hmm.
were to ask for feedback around those people that matter to me and I highly appreciate their opinion on, I'm more likely to become a better version of myself rather than what I have in my little mind thought of myself to be like.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that curiosity. Well, Naveed, thank you for such a powerful and deeply conversation on what it truly means to reinvent oneself from the inside out. For our listeners who want to go deeper, check out Naveed's book, Mastering Executive Transitions, and his resources on leadership and career transformations. Thank you, Naveed, again for a wonderful, wonderful interview. It really was insightful. I love this. And I can't wait for our listeners to get in contact with you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Karen, for the great conversation, and I can't wait to get in touch with your audience.
Absolutely. And for those listeners, thank you for tuning in to Reinvention Real Talk. I am Karen Larea, and I will see you next time.